They laughed at the woman in the worn jacket. 3 hours of cruel jokes. Then the plane's engines failed at 37,000 feet, and she stood up. "This is Ghost Rider," she said quietly. In 5 seconds, everything changed. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Sarah Chin stood in a long security line at Denver International Airport. Her boarding pass was folded and creased from her nervous hands. She looked like any other tired traveler waiting for Flight 612 to Washington, D.C. Her clothes told a simple story. Old blue jeans with a tear near the knee. A faded green jacket that had been washed too many times. Her dark hair was tied back with a plain rubber band. The canvas bag on her shoulder looked like it came from an army surplus store. The business people behind her wore expensive suits. They talked loudly about their important meetings in Washington. To them, Sarah was invisible. The college students ahead of her planned their spring break trips. To them, Sarah was nobody worth noticing. "Next passenger," called James, the gate agent. He had only been working for the airline for 6 months. Sarah handed him her crumpled boarding pass. James scanned it and looked at his computer screen. His eyes went wide. "Seat 24A. Business class." He looked at Sarah again, confused. "Miss, is this really your ticket?" "Yes," Sarah said softly. "That's my seat." James shrugged and gave back her pass. "Okay then. You can board now." Walking down the narrow plane aisle, Sarah felt everyone staring at her. A man in a suit that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe looked at her with clear disgust. A woman wearing diamond earrings whispered to her friend, pointing at Sarah's old backpack. "Excuse me," Sarah said politely to the large man blocking her path. His gold watch looked very expensive. "Economy class is in the back," he said rudely, not moving. "I'm in seat 24A, Sarah replied, showing her ticket. The man looked at her boarding pass like he couldn't believe it. His name tag said Robert Miller, Miller Industries. "Business class must be giving away charity seats now," he muttered. He finally moved, shaking his head. Airlines let anyone sit up front these days. Sarah found her window seat and put her backpack under the seat in front of her. The bag was old and green with small patches sewn on it. Most people would think they were just decorations. But each patch told a story that would shock everyone on this plane if they knew the truth. Next to Sarah sat Mrs. Victoria Lewis, a rich woman from Manhattan. She looked at Sarah like she was something dirty that didn't belong in business class. "I hope you're not one of those nervous flyers," Mrs. Lewis said coldly. "I hate it when people panic during bumps." Sarah smiled gently. "Flying doesn't bother me." Across the aisle, a doctor named Philip Anderson talked loudly to his friend. "The problem with America today," he announced, "is that we're lowering standards everywhere. Even airlines are letting the wrong kind of people into business class." His friend, a lawyer named Charles Beck, nodded hard. "You're absolutely right. Just look around this cabin. The quality has really dropped." Both men looked directly at Sarah, making it clear who they meant. The flight attendant, Nicole Martinez, came to take drink orders. She smiled warmly at the other passengers but barely looked at Sarah. "What would you like to drink?" she asked Mrs. Lewis sweetly. "Champagne, please," Mrs. Lewis answered. Nicole turned to Sarah with a fake smile. "And for you?" "Just water, please," Sarah said. "Just water?" Nicole sounded surprised. "We have juice, soda, coffee." "Water is fine, thank you." Nicole shrugged and walked away. Sarah heard her whisper to another flight attendant, "She probably can't afford anything else." At 9:30 a.m., Flight 612 left Denver and climbed into the clear morning sky. The plane was a Boeing 777, one of the airline's newest aircraft. As they reached 37,000 feet, passengers settled in for the 5-hour flight to Washington. Sarah looked out her window at the clouds below. She had seen this view many times before. But from a very different type of aircraft. These passengers had no idea that the quiet woman in seat 24A had more flying hours than every commercial pilot they'd ever flown with, combined. "So what do you do for work?" Mrs. Lewis asked, though her tone made it clear she didn't really care. "I used to work for the government," Sarah answered simply. Mrs. Lewis laughed. "Oh, a government worker. That explains the budget clothes." She pointed at Sarah's simple outfit with obvious disgust. Behind them, Robert Miller told his business partner a story. "I'm flying to D.C. to close a $40 million deal," he said loudly. "Not everyone on this plane can say they're doing something that important." Dr. Anderson joined in. "I'm speaking at a medical conference about my new heart surgery method. It's going to change everything." Charles Beck nodded. "And I'm arguing a case before the Supreme Court. Really important work." They all looked at Sarah, waiting for her to say something impressive. When she stayed quiet, they seemed to decide she wasn't worth their time. "Some people just don't understand what real success looks like," Mrs. Lewis said loudly enough for Sarah to hear. Sarah kept reading her paperback book. It was a manual about aircraft systems, but she held it so others couldn't see the cover. 2 hours into the flight, meal service began. The flight attendants gave elegant menus to all the business class passengers, describing the fancy food choices. But when Nicole reached Sarah's seat, things changed. "I'm sorry," Nicole said, though she didn't sound sorry at all. "We only printed enough menus for our regular business class customers." "Don't worry," Nicole continued. "I can just tell you what we have." Sarah looked up calmly. "That's fine. I'll have whatever is easiest." Mrs. Lewis smiled meanly. "Some people just aren't used to fine dining," she whispered to the passenger behind her. When the meals arrived, every passenger got their food on real china plates with metal forks and knives and cloth napkins. Sarah got her meal on a plastic tray with plastic utensils, just like economy class. "Oh my," said Dr. Anderson, noticing the difference. "I think they made a mistake with your meal." "It's fine," Sarah said, starting to eat. Robert Miller laughed. "Maybe that's what she asked for. Some people prefer simple food." The insults continued throughout the meal. The passengers seemed to enjoy making fun of Sarah. They assumed she was too poor or too dumb to understand what they were really saying. "I bet she's never eaten at a real restaurant," Charles Beck said quietly to his neighbor. "She probably thinks McDonald's is fancy," Mrs. Lewis replied with a cruel smile. Sarah kept eating her simple meal, showing no reaction. She had eaten much worse food in much worse places. But these passengers would never believe that. As the meal ended, the comments got worse and more direct. "I wonder how she even paid for a business class ticket," Dr. Anderson said to his friend, loud enough for Sarah to hear. "Probably using government assistance," Charles Beck replied, laughing. Robert Miller added, "I heard they have programs now that help people like her fly. Our tax money at work." Mrs. Lewis made her own cruel comment. "Look at those clothes. That jacket looks like it came from a thrift store. And those shoes. I wouldn't even donate them to charity." Sarah kept reading, but her hands held the pages a little tighter. She had heard worse insults in war zones. But somehow the casual cruelty of these regular people felt different. "Miss," Nicole said while picking up Sarah's plastic tray. "I hope the food was okay for you. I know it's not what you're probably used to eating." The other passengers laughed at this, finding it cleverly mean. Sarah looked up at Nicole with calm eyes. "It was fine, thank you." But inside, Sarah was remembering other meals. Military rations eaten in a cockpit while flying through enemy fire. Cold food eaten in desert bunkers between bombing runs. These people had no idea what real hardship meant. At 12:45 p.m., somewhere over Kansas, everything changed. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Williams," came the voice over the speaker. "We're experiencing some technical problems." But Sarah's head snapped up from her book. She heard something in the captain's voice that the other passengers missed. A carefully controlled tension that meant this was much more serious than a simple technical problem. 10 minutes later, the captain's voice came back. This time, the stress was obvious. "Folks, we need to make an emergency landing. Our navigation and communication systems have failed. We're having trouble staying in contact with air traffic control." Now passengers started to worry. Mrs. Lewis gripped her armrest tightly. Dr. Anderson's face went pale. Robert Miller stopped talking about business deals and looked genuinely scared. "What does that mean?" Charles Beck shouted. "Are we going to crash?" A flight attendant tried to calm everyone. "Please don't panic. The pilots are trained for exactly this situation. We'll be fine." But Sarah could tell from the crew's body language that they were far from fine. She had seen that look before. The look of people in serious trouble with few options. 15 minutes later, things got much worse. "This is Captain Williams again." The voice over the speaker was now clearly stressed. "I need to be honest with you. We've lost most of our electronic systems. It appears to be some kind of cyber attack on aircraft systems. We're flying blind and we can't communicate with ground control." The cabin erupted in panicked voices. "Cyber attack?" Mrs. Lewis screamed. "What does that mean?" "Are we going to die?" shouted Dr. Anderson. Robert Miller frantically tried to call his office, but his phone had no signal. The flight attendants tried to keep order, but they were clearly as scared as the passengers. "Please stay calm," Nicole announced, though her voice shook. "The pilots are working on the situation." But Sarah knew the truth. She had studied cyber warfare during her military career. If someone had successfully attacked multiple aircraft systems at once, this was much more than a simple computer problem. This was an act of war. She also knew something else that terrified her. Without navigation and communication systems, this 777 was basically a giant glider that would eventually run out of fuel and crash. Sarah unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. "Miss, please sit down," Nicole said firmly. "Everyone needs to stay seated." "I need to talk to the pilots," Sarah said calmly. "I'm sorry, but passengers aren't allowed in the cockpit, especially during an emergency." Sarah looked Nicole straight in the eyes. "My name is Sarah Chen. I'm a retired Air Force pilot with 28 years of combat experience. I've flown through cyber attacks before. I might be able to help." Nicole stared at her in disbelief. "You're a pilot?" "I was," Sarah said. "And right now, I might be the only person on this plane who knows how to navigate without electronics." Mrs. Lewis heard this and laughed hysterically. "Her. She's just some nobody in cheap clothes. She's probably lying." But Nicole saw something in Sarah's eyes that made her pause. A calmness and confidence that didn't match the simple clothes and quiet personality. I'll ask the captain," Nicole said uncertainly. Nicole used the internal phone to call the cockpit. Sarah could only hear one side of the conversation. "Captain, there's a passenger who says she's a retired Air Force pilot." A pause. "Yes, sir. Sarah Chen." A longer pause. "Yes, sir. I'll bring her up right away." Nicole hung up and looked at Sarah with sudden respect. "The captain wants to see you immediately." Sarah followed Nicole to the front of the plane and into the cockpit. Captain Williams and First Officer Davis looked exhausted and desperate. The cockpit was dark except for a few emergency lights. Most of the electronic displays were completely black. "You're the Air Force pilot?" Captain Williams asked. "Retired," Sarah confirmed. "What's your situation?" "Everything's gone," First Officer Davis said. Navigation, communication, autopilot, even our backup systems. Someone hit us with some kind of super virus that's spreading through aircraft worldwide. Sarah studied the dead instruments. What about manual controls? Still working? Yes, Captain Williams replied. But we're flying blind. No GPS, no radio contact, no way to know where we are or where we're going. Sarah nodded. I can help with that. Do you have any paper charts on board? Just the emergency backup charts, Davis said. But they're pretty basic. That's all we need, Sarah said confidently. I can navigate by dead reckoning using visual landmarks. It's an old method, but it works. Captain Williams looked doubtful. With all respect, ma'am, this isn't a small plane. This is a 777 with 300 passengers. Sarah smiled for the first time since boarding the plane. Captain, I've navigated B-52 bombers through enemy territory with no electronics. I think I can handle your 777. For the next hour, Sarah worked with the pilots to figure out their position and plan a route to the nearest airport. She used visual landmarks on the ground, the position of the sun, and her internal clock to calculate where they were. Based on my calculations, we're about 200 miles southwest of Kansas City, she announced. If we keep this heading and descend slowly, we should be able to reach Kansas City International Airport. But how will we land without radio contact? Davis asked. The tower won't know we're coming. We'll have to do an emergency visual approach, Sarah explained. It's risky, but it's our best option. As they worked together, Sarah's true expertise became clear. She knew aircraft systems better than pilots who had been flying commercial jets for decades. Her knowledge of emergency procedures was complete. Her calm under pressure was remarkable. Ma'am, Captain Williams said finally. What exactly did you fly in the Air Force? Sarah hesitated for a moment. Different aircraft. Mostly fighters. What fighters? Davis pressed. F-22 Raptors mostly. Some classified aircraft I can't talk about. The two commercial pilots stared at her in shock. F-22 pilots were the best of the best. The elite fighter pilots in the world. You flew Raptors? Captain Williams whispered. Sarah nodded. For 15 years. As they got closer to Kansas City, Captain Williams made a critical decision. We need fighter escort. Even if we can't talk to the tower, maybe we can get the military's attention. He switched to the emergency frequency and started transmitting, hoping someone would hear them. Mayday, Mayday. This is United Airlines Flight 612. We are approaching Kansas City International Airport with complete systems failure. Requesting immediate assistance. For several minutes, there was only static. Then a voice crackled through the speakers. United 612, this is Whiteman Air Force Base. We read you. What is your emergency? Captain Williams quickly explained their situation. The Air Force controller sounded shocked. United 612, you're reporting a cyber attack on your aircraft systems? Confirmed, Williams replied. All electronic navigation and communication systems are down. We're flying on manual control only. Copy that, United 612. We're sending fighters to intercept and escort you to Kansas City. What's your current position? Sarah took the microphone. Whiteman, this is the navigator on United 612. We're approximately 50 miles southwest of Kansas City International. Altitude 15,000 feet. Heading 090. Copy, United 612. Fighters are airborne. Estimate intercept in 8 minutes. 8 minutes later, two sleek gray fighters appeared off the 777's wingtips. The F-22 Raptors flew in perfect formation, their pilots clearly visible in their cockpits. United 612, this is Raptor Lead, came a voice over the radio. We have visual contact. We'll escort you to Kansas City International. But what happened next would change everything. In the cockpit of the 777, Captain Williams was amazed by the advanced fighters. "Those are F-22s, he said to Sarah. "The most advanced fighters in the world." Sarah was studying the lead Raptor through the window. "The pilot in the lead aircraft is very good. Perfect formation flying." Over the radio, they heard the F-22 pilot talking to his wingman. "Raptor 2, maintain position on the right side. I'll guide them in." "Copy, lead," came the reply. As they flew toward Kansas City, the lead F-22 pilot started asking questions about their navigation. "United 612, how are you navigating without GPS?" Captain Williams looked at Sarah, who took the microphone again. "Raptor lead, we're using dead reckoning and visual landmarks." "Copy that." "Who's your navigator?" "Retired Air Force," Sarah replied simply. "What's your background, navigator?" Sarah hesitated. She had kept her identity secret for so long that it felt strange to reveal it. But with 300 lives at stake, secrecy didn't matter anymore. "Raptor lead, call sign Ghost Rider." The radio went completely silent for almost 30 seconds. Then the lead F-22 pilot's voice came back, and it was completely different. Filled with awe and respect. "Ghost Rider? Did you say Ghost Rider?" "Confirmed," Sarah replied. "Stand by, United 612. They could hear the F-22 pilot talking rapidly to someone else on another frequency, but couldn't make out the words. Captain Williams and First Officer Davis looked at Sarah with confusion. "What's Ghost Rider?" Williams asked. Sarah sighed. "It was my call sign." "But why did he react like that?" Davis wanted to know. Before Sarah could answer, the radio crackled to life again. "United 612, this is Colonel Marcus Thompson, 509th Bomb Wing Commander. Are you Colonel Sarah Chen, call sign Ghost Rider?" Sarah took a deep breath. "Confirmed, Colonel. Retired Colonel Sarah Chen." "Ma'am, it's an honor to speak with you." "Raptor lead, did you copy that transmission?" "Yes, sir," came the excited voice of the F-22 pilot. "Sir, that's really Ghost Rider." In the background, they could hear the F-22 pilot talking to his wingman. "Dude, that's freaking Ghost Rider." "The Ghost Rider." Captain Williams was getting more confused. "What's going on? Why is everyone so excited?" Sarah looked uncomfortable with the attention. "It's not important right now. Let's focus on landing this plane." But over the radio, Colonel Thompson was already explaining to the air traffic controllers at Kansas City International Airport. "Kansas City Tower, be advised that United 612 has Colonel Sarah Chen aboard. Call sign Ghost Rider. She's providing navigation assistance." "Ghost Rider," came the surprised voice of the air traffic controller. "The Ghost Rider?" "Confirmed." First Officer Davis couldn't contain his curiosity any longer. "Ma'am, who exactly are you?" Sarah sighed again. "I was a fighter pilot for 28 years. I retired 5 years ago. But why is everyone treating you like some kind of celebrity?" Before Sarah could answer, the lead F-22 pilot came back on the radio. "United 612, Ghost Rider, this is Major David Kim. Ma'am, I studied your missions at the Fighter Weapons School. The Syria rescue operation is legendary." Sarah closed her eyes briefly. "Major Kim, let's focus on the current mission." "Yes, ma'am. But ma'am, it's really an honor to be flying escort for you." Captain Williams couldn't let it go. "What Syria rescue operation?" Over the radio, they could hear Major Kim talking excitedly to ground control. "Kansas City Tower, you need to understand who we're dealing with here. Ghost Rider flew the most dangerous rescue mission in modern Air Force history." "Major Kim," Sarah said firmly into the microphone. "That's classified information." "Ma'am, It was declassified 2 years ago. The whole Air Force knows the story now. Colonel Thompson's voice came over the radio. Ghost Rider, the Major is correct. Your Syria mission is now taught in our advanced tactical courses. Captain Williams looked at Sarah with new eyes. What happened in Syria? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. 6 years ago, a special forces team was trapped behind enemy lines. The area was covered by advanced surface-to-air missiles. No rescue was possible using normal methods. What did you do? Davis asked. I went in alone. At night. Flying below radar coverage. Major Kim's voice came over the radio again. She flew through the most dangerous airspace in the world, rescued 12 Special Forces soldiers, and destroyed 3 missile sites on her way out. You flew alone into enemy territory? Captain Williams asked, amazed. It was the only way to avoid detection, Sarah explained. A single F-22 flying at low altitude can be almost invisible to radar. But how did you find the soldiers in the dark? Night vision and thermal imaging. Plus a lot of luck. Over the radio, Colonel Thompson added more details. Ghost Rider's mission saved 12 lives and eliminated threats that had been shooting down our aircraft for months. She was awarded the Air Force Cross. The Air Force Cross, Captain Williams whispered. That was the highest decoration for valor, second only to the Medal of Honor. As they continued toward Kansas City, more details of Sarah's legendary career came to light. The F-22 pilot seemed to know every mission she had flown. Ghost Rider, Major Kim said over the radio. Is it true you once shot down 4 enemy fighters in a single engagement? The commercial pilots waited for her answer, barely breathing. That's classified, Sarah replied. Ma'am, that mission was declassified last year. The Pentagon released the gun camera footage. Sarah looked annoyed. They released the footage? Yes, ma'am. It's used in air-to-air combat training now. You're famous on YouTube. Captain Williams and First Officer Davis stared at Sarah in disbelief. You shot down 4 enemy planes? Williams asked. It was a long time ago, Sarah said quietly. Colonel Thompson came back on the radio. Ghost Rider, for the benefit of the commercial crew, perhaps you could share some of your background. Sarah was clearly uncomfortable, but she realized these men needed to understand who they were dealing with. I flew combat missions for 25 years, she said finally. F-16s, F-15s, and F-22s. I had some success in air-to-air combat. Some success. Major Kim laughed over the radio. Ma'am, you're the top fighter ace of the 21st century. 18 confirmed kills. 18, Davis whispered. That's more than any pilot since World War II, Captain Williams added, his voice filled with awe. As they approached Kansas City International Airport, Sarah took control of the radio communications with the F-22 escorts. Raptor lead, what's the wind situation at Kansas City? Ghost Rider, winds are 180 at 15 knots, gusting to 25. Visibility 10 miles, ceiling 3,000 feet. Copy. We'll approach from the south on runway 19er. Understood, Ghost Rider. We'll maintain escort until you're on final approach. Sarah turned to Captain Williams. I recommend a straight-in approach to runway 19 left. It's the longest runway and the wind is right down the pipe. But without radio contact with the tower, how will they know we're coming? The F-22s are talking to them. They'll clear the runway and have emergency equipment standing by. As they began their descent, Sarah continued to navigate using visual landmarks. She identified highways, rivers, and buildings on the ground, using them to guide the aircraft toward the airport. There, she said, pointing out the cockpit window. Kansas City International Airport. 2 o'clock, about 20 miles. Captain Williams looked where she was pointing and saw the airport in the distance. How did you spot that so quickly? Practice, Sarah said simply. I've been finding targets from aircraft for 30 years. As they got closer to the airport, Major Kim came on the radio one final time. Ghost Rider, it's been an honor flying with you today. Raptor flight is breaking off now. Good luck with your landing. Thank you, Major. You flew a good escort. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Go ahead. What's it like being a legend? Sarah was quiet for a moment. Major, I'm just a pilot who did her job. I was just the taxi driver. Yes, ma'am. But what a taxi driver. The F-22s peeled away as the 777 lined up for final approach to runway 19 left. Despite having no electronic navigation aids, Sarah guided Captain Williams to a perfect landing. The plane touched down smoothly and rolled to a stop. Fire trucks and ambulances were standing by, but they weren't needed. As the passengers cheered and clapped, Sarah quietly gathered her things. When the plane stopped at the gate, the business-class passengers who had been so cruel to Sarah earlier sat in stunned silence. They had just learned that the woman they had mocked and insulted was one of the most decorated fighter pilots in Air Force history. Mrs. Lewis, who had called Sarah's clothes budget, now realized she had been sitting next to a genuine war hero. Robert Miller, who had suggested Sarah got a charity ticket, understood that he had insulted someone whose courage and skill had saved countless lives. Dr. Anderson and Charles Beck, who had talked about lowering standards, realized they had been in the presence of someone whose standards were higher than anything they could imagine. Nicole, the flight attendant who had given Sarah a plastic meal tray, felt deeply ashamed of her behavior. As Sarah prepared to leave the plane, several passengers approached her to apologize. But what Sarah said to them would become the lesson that changed everything. Not just for them, but for the entire airline industry. Colonel Chen, Mrs. Lewis said, her voice shaking. I owe you a huge apology. I had no idea who you were. Sarah looked at her calmly. Mrs. Lewis, you treated me exactly the way you treat anyone who doesn't look wealthy. That says more about your character than mine. But you saved our lives, Robert Miller said. Sarah shook her head. Mr. Miller, I did what anyone with my training would have done. But the way you treated me before you knew who I was, that shows who you really are. The story of Flight 612 spread around the world within hours. Videos of the F-22 pilots saluting Sarah's call sign went viral on social media. News outlets picked up the story of the legendary pilot who had been treated poorly by passengers who didn't know her true identity. The passengers who had been cruel to Sarah faced real consequences for their behavior. Social media users identified them from news coverage and airport security footage. Robert Miller's real estate company lost several major clients who didn't want to be associated with someone who treated veterans poorly. His business reputation was badly damaged. Mrs. Lewis found that her country club friends were less welcoming after they saw her behavior on the news. Several charity organizations asked her to step down from their boards. Dr. Anderson's medical practice suffered when patients saw videos of him insulting a war hero. Many chose to find different doctors. Charles Beck's law firm asked him to take early retirement after the negative publicity hurt their reputation. Nicole, the flight attendant, was suspended from her job pending an investigation into her treatment of passengers. But Sarah didn't celebrate their misfortune. When reporters asked her about the consequences faced by the passengers, she said simply, I hope they learn from this experience and treat people better in the future. 3 months later, Sarah received a letter from Nicole, the flight attendant. Dear Colonel Chen, it read. I've been thinking about that flight every day since it happened. I treated you poorly because I made assumptions about you based on your appearance. I want you to know that your grace and dignity in the face of our cruelty has changed how I view people. I've started a new training program for flight attendants about treating all passengers with respect. I call it the Seat 24A protocol, because you never know who you're serving. Sarah smiled as she read the letter. She wrote back. Nicole, I'm glad you learned something from our experience. But remember, even if I hadn't been a decorated pilot, I still deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. Every person does. The story became a lesson taught in business schools about the dangers of making assumptions about customers. Airlines around the world started new training programs based on Sarah's experience. The Air Force developed a training program called Ghost Rider Protocol, a reminder that you never know who you're talking to or what they've been through. Today, Sarah lives quietly in Colorado, working as a flight instructor at a small airport. Her students don't know about her legendary military career unless they ask. To them, she's just Miss Chen, a patient teacher who helps them learn to fly. But sometimes when a student is struggling with confidence, Sarah will share a simple piece of wisdom. Remember that how you treat people reflects who you really are. Treat everyone with respect and dignity because you never know who you're talking to. Flying isn't about being perfect, she tells them. It's about staying calm under pressure, making good decisions when things go wrong, and always remembering that you're responsible for the safety of everyone around you. But most importantly, remember that heroes don't always look heroic. They might be sitting quietly in seat 24A, wearing old clothes and carrying a worn backpack. They might be the person you ignore or dismiss without a second thought. You never know who's sitting in seat 24A. Treat everyone with kindness and respect. You never know what battles they've fought or what sacrifices they've made. The person sitting next to you might just be a hero in disguise.